The Force is old and full of shadows.
The tent breathes. That is the only word for it. The banthahide walls expanding and contracting in the canyon wind outside, slow and rhythmic, like something enormous and tired drawing its last air. Heat sits inside the structure with the density of a physical weight. The light comes in sideways, in pale amber slats through the gaps in the hide, and dust motes turn in each shaft with the unhurried patience of things that have nowhere to be. Anakin Skywalker kneels in the sand. His mother's head rests in his lap. Her wrists are bound above her, still lashed to the frame pole by strips of leather the color of old rust, and he has not cut them yet, because cutting them would mean accepting that it no longer matters whether they are cut. Her chest moves, barely, a shallow flutter, bird-like, the kind of breathing that sounds like a question the body is no longer sure it wants answered. "Mom," his voice comes out wrong. Too young, too raw, scraped clean of everything he'd spent 19 years building over it. She opens her eyes. They are the same eyes, sand-colored and warm, and so exhausted they've come out the other side of exhaustion into something almost peaceful. She finds his face and stays there, and the corner of her mouth moves. Ani. A breath. Not a word. The sound a candle makes before it goes out. My boy. I'm here. He presses her hand between both of his. Flesh against flesh. Real, actual flesh. No glove, no servo, no 23 years of black polymer separating sensation from skin, and the contact hits him with a force he is completely unprepared for. He can feel the specific temperature of her palm, the papery texture of it, the fine geography of her knuckles. I'm right here. You came. I came. Her eyes close for a moment, then open again. Fighting, she was always fighting. I love, the word stops. Her chest rises once more, very slightly, and then it does not rise again. He holds her. He holds her and does not move, and the tent breathes around them, and the dust turns in the light. It arrives without sound. Not a crash, not an explosion, a flood. The kind that doesn't announce itself until the water is already at your throat. 23 years of a life he has not lived yet, and somehow already survived crash into him in the space between one heartbeat and the next, and the sensation is of a man being simultaneously struck by lightning and submerged. Padmé's voice on Mustafar. You're breaking my heart. Obi-Wan, standing on the black sand, his face doing something Anakin had spent 2 decades refusing to look at directly in memory. The respirator. The first breath inside the mask. Mechanical, filtered, tasting of recycled metal and the absolute absence of anything human. Luke's face in the throne room. Father, please. The lightning. His own hands impossibly, lifting the Emperor. Then, nothing. A white corridor and the smell of nothing and his son's voice saying, I've got to save you. You already have. The memories arrive and keep arriving, layer over layer, 23 years of a man he was and was again, compressed into a body that is 19 years old and kneeling in the sand of Tatooine with its dead mother in its arms. His own heartbeat is enormous and unmedicated and completely unfiltered, hammering against his ribs with a physical insistence he'd forgotten was possible. His lungs, his actual biological undamaged lungs, pull in a breath of desert air that smells of cured hide and bantha musk and blood and dust, and the rawness of it is staggering. No filter, no vocoder, no respirator hissing its metronomic rhythm underneath everything. Just him. Just lungs. Just this tent, and this body, and his mother's cooling hand in both of his. Then the other voice arrives. It comes from somewhere below conscious thought, from the place that is neither the force nor memory but the territory between them, low, reasonable, familiar the way a scar is familiar. They took her, not a shout. A murmur. The voice of something that has learned patience. She was here for a month. 37 days. She called your name. And they kept her anyway. And you weren't here. And now she's gone. His hands tighten around his mother's. You have the power. You've always had the power. You know what these creatures are. You know what they do. You know what you did last time. And you know that it worked. It didn't bring her back, but it felt like. I know what it felt like. He says it aloud, quietly, to the empty air of the tent. His own voice, his actual voice, still unfamiliar to ears that spent 2 decades hearing everything through a vocoder filter. Strange, young, his. Then you know there's no reason to stop this time. No pattern to confess to afterward. No code to. I remember everything. His jaw tightens. I remember what I did to this camp. I remember dragging the bodies into a pile. I remember how it felt in the moment. I remember that it felt like power. And I remember every single morning after that when it felt like nothing at all, except one more weight on a chain I was already too tired to carry. Silence from the voice. Not retreat. Patience. She deserved better. Yes, his eyes are dry. They have been dry through all of it. The memories, the grief, the voice and its quiet invitations. Not because he doesn't feel it. He feels it the way a man feels a wound that goes to the bone. Total, cellular, permanent. She deserved everything better. She deserved a son who was actually here. She deserved 37 days of someone looking. He exhales. It is the longest exhale he has taken since arriving in this tent, and at the end of it something shifts, not releases, nothing so clean as release, but changes register, goes from acute to chronic, from fire to the kind of pain that is simply part of the temperature of things. So do it. For her. I already did it. Bare and flat. I already paid that price. I already know exactly what it bought and what it costs, and what it leaves behind. You're asking me to buy it again, and I'm telling you, he reaches down, finds the lightsaber at his belt. His 19-year-old hand wraps around a grip it has only learned in this life, and a dead man's muscle memory settles into it with horrible ease. He sets the saber down in the sand beside him. I'm telling you no. The voice does not argue. It was never built for argument. It was built for moments of shock and grief and adrenal collapse when the rational mind briefly vacates. And it has found instead a man who has been to the other end of that corridor and walked back. It subsides. He sits with his mother in the silence for a long moment. Then he gently, carefully, reaches up and cuts the leather bindings at her wrists with a short pull of the force, and folds her hands together across her chest, and stands. I remember, Mom. Low. Just above the ambient hum of wind in Canyon Rock. I remember all of it. And I'm not doing it again. He picks her up. This is the detail the memories could not have fully prepared him for. The actual weight of her. Not heavy. She weighs almost nothing after a month of captivity, but present. Real. Her head rests against his shoulder, and her hand falls against his chest, and she is warm in the way that means she has only just stopped being alive. The heat leaving so slowly it feels like she might simply be sleeping. Might simply be. He walks toward the tent's opening. Outside, the camp comes to awareness. 6 Tuskens, then 12, then more, converging on the tent entrance with raised gaffy sticks and the low guttural warble that serves as alarm. He walks through the entrance and into the blinding white of Tatooine noon, and does not stop. He does not reach for the lightsaber in the sand behind him. He does not reach for anything. He simply extends himself, not outward, but downward, into the living current of the Force, the way a man who has drowned before knows how to float, and radiates. Light without heat. Presence without threat. The absolute annihilating stillness of something that has survived its own worst possible ending and found on the other side of it a peculiar and total peace. The nearest Tusken stops mid-stride. Then the next. The gaffy sticks lower, one by one, in silence. One elder, the one with the bone and glass talisman at his belt, lifts a wrapped hand toward his face in a gesture that has no translation in Anakin's memory, but reads, unmistakably, as step aside. The camp parts around him. He walks through them. He walks until the canyon opens, and the homestead is a brown smudge in the distance across the flats, and the twin suns hang enormous and indifferent in a white sky. He carries his mother into the desert. Behind him, the camp does not resume its noise for a very long time. The vaporators hum, 3 of them, spaced across the ridge above the homestead's entrance, pulling moisture from air that has almost none to give. The sound is low and mechanical and constant. The sound of effort, of a machine doing something nearly impossible, and doing it anyway, hour after hour. Because stopping is not an option it was built with. The twin suns are past their peak now, tilting toward the western mesa line, and the shadows stretching from the homestead's exterior walls are the first shadows of any length the day has produced. Anakin walks down the ridge path with his mother in his arms. Owen Lars sees him first. He is standing at the outer door running a diagnostic on one of the power couplings, and he looks up, and he goes very still. He is not a man given to visible reaction, broad-shouldered, deliberate, the kind of stillness that comes from a life of absorbing difficult information without the luxury of time to fall apart over it. He absorbs this now, the young Jedi he has never met walking out of the desert carrying a woman he has spent 37 days grieving as already lost. He sets the coupling down. Beru, he calls back through the open door. Quiet, controlled, get my father. Cliegg Lars sits in his repulsor chair at the center of the courtyard, because the steps down into the homestead's interior have become, since the surgery, a problem he is still negotiating with himself about. He is a large man reduced, not broken, but compacted, the way stone is compacted by pressure, denser and harder at the cost of something that used to be ease. His right leg ends just below the knee in a wrapped stump, and he does not look at it when he can avoid it. And he cannot always avoid it. He looks up when Anakin comes through the gate. His face does something complex and private and very fast, and then it stops doing anything at all, and that stillness is its own kind of answer. Anakin stops in front of him. There is nothing adequate to say, so he doesn't try to say it. He simply looks at Cliegg Lars, this man who rode out with a rescue party and came back with 26 empty saddles, who sat in this courtyard for 37 days carrying the specific weight of I should have gone back, and lets the man look at her. She was alive, Cliegg said. The words scraped. When I found her she was, I know. Anakin's voice is quiet. Not cutting. Just certain. She was alive when I got there too. Cliegg's jaw works. He reaches out and touches Shmi's hand, the one folded across her chest, with the careful reverence of a man who has rehearsed this moment in his worst hours without ever letting himself believe it would actually arrive. Did she? She knew I was there. She said my name. The sound that comes out of Cliegg Lars is not a word. He covers it fast, pressing his mouth into a line, and looks away toward the western ridge. Anakin waits. He is, in this, extremely patient. The patience of a man who has sat with worse grief than this, in worse places than this, and learned that the only thing you can do with it is stay present and not flinch. Beru appears at the interior stairway, and she takes in the scene with eyes that are already wet, and she comes forward and puts her hand on Clegg's shoulder, and nobody says anything for a while. Owen had not expected to like him. This was not a prejudice he would have admitted aloud, but it was a fact. Jedi made him uneasy in the abstract, and Anakin Skywalker specifically carried a reputation. Young, brilliant, arrogant, reckless. The kind of person for whom rules were suggestions and caution was a character flaw. He had braced for someone who would arrive with too much energy and too many opinions, and make his father's grief somehow secondary to the drama of the return. Instead, he watches Anakin help carry his stepmother's body down into the homestead, with the quiet efficiency of someone who has performed this specific kind of care before, and he doesn't know what to do with that. He helps prepare the side room. He brings water. He finds himself, without quite deciding to, making tea. Anakin accepts the cup without comment and drinks it standing up. Leaning against the kitchen doorframe, looking at the middle distance with an expression Owen has no frame of reference for. Not shock. Not the performed composure of someone suppressing shock. Something older than either. You were in the Jundland wastes alone, Owen says finally. Not an accusation. An attempt to understand the shape of something. Yes, for how long? Long enough. A beat. I'm sorry I wasn't faster. Owen doesn't have an answer for that either. He drinks his own tea. Outside, one of the vaporators cycles through its maintenance hum and settles back into rhythm. She talked about you, Owen says eventually. A lot. At first. Before he stops. Starts again. She was proud of you. Anakin looks at the cup in his hands. I know, he says softly. I'm going to try to deserve it. Padmé finds him at the moisture ridge at sunset. She had held herself together through all of it. The arrival, Cliegg's grief, the preparation, the practical ordering of a household absorbing loss. Because she is Padmé Amidala, and holding herself together through unbearable things is a skill so deeply embedded in her it no longer feels like effort. She held it together until Owen and Beru took Cliegg inside, and then she came up the ridge path to where Anakin is standing with his face to the falling suns, and she allows herself, very briefly, to not hold it together. He doesn't turn around when she reaches him, but he knows she is there. Ani, I know, he says. I need a minute. Take it. She stands beside him and looks at the same sky and breathes until the shaking in her hands stops. The suns descend. The sky goes from white to copper to a deep arterial red along the mesa line, and the desert cools in the particular fast way Tatooine cools, not gradually but all at once, as if the heat simply decides it's finished, and leaves. You're not who I expected you to be right now, she says finally. He is quiet for a moment. No, the Anakin I've been, she chooses the word carefully, the Anakin I've been traveling with these past few days has been reckless and impulsive and slightly infuriating. That's accurate. This isn't that. She turns to look at him. He is in profile against the red sky, very still, and there is something about the quality of his stillness that she cannot name, but cannot stop trying to. Something happened to you in that camp. Something beyond what we would expect, even given what you found there. He turns to look at her then, and what stops her is his eyes. They are the same eyes, the same clear, startling blue she remembers from Naboo. But the thing behind them is not the same. It is not young. It is not reckless. It is something she has only seen before in much older people, in war veterans and survivors, in people who have paid for knowledge with a currency she cannot name. There's something I need to tell you, he says. Both you and Obi-Wan. Not tonight. He glances back toward the homestead. Tonight is for her. But soon. She studies him. Is it dangerous? What you have to tell us? Yes, for us. Or for the Republic? Both. A breath. Neither of you will believe it immediately. I need you to know that going in, and I need you to know that I'm going to tell it to you anyway, because there's no version of what comes next where I can protect either of you by keeping it from you. She is quiet, processing this. The last sliver of the primary sun vanishes behind the mesa, and the sky shifts, rapidly, toward stars. All right, she says. After. They stand for a moment longer in the cooling dark. Then she asks, in a slightly different voice, did she know? At the end, did she know you came? The knowledge sits in his chest like a stone. Yes, he says. She knew. Padmé closes her eyes, nods once, slowly, to herself, to some internal account she keeps of the world's cruelties and the small graces that occasionally interrupt them. She doesn't take his hand, and he doesn't offer it. But they stand on the ridge together in the first stars of the Tatooine evening, and neither of them moves to go inside for a long, quiet while. Tomorrow, the message will come. The coordinates, the hologram, the sequence of events he can already see arranged in front of him like a tactical map he has studied for 20 years. Geonosis. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, the desert breathes, and the vaporators hum, and his mother is at rest in the room below. And Anakin Skywalker stands in the first evening of a life he is going to do completely differently this time, and lets the silence be what it is. The hologram flickers blue in the low light of the Lars homestead's common room. Obi-Wan Kenobi, reduced to a translucent figure the height of a hand, stands in the projection with the particular stillness of a man who is choosing his words with care because he does not know who else might be listening. Behind him, In the compressed geometry of the holofeed, the rock formations of Geonosis are just visible, striated, rust-colored, enormous. The insectoid architecture of the city carved into them is barely distinguishable from the natural stone. That is, Anakin knows. Entirely deliberate. Anakin, my long-range transmitter has been knocked out. Retransmit this message to the Council. A pause. The specific pause of a man adding something that wasn't in his prepared remarks. I have found some things here. The scale of what's being built, what's being planned. Anakin, it's larger than the Council knows. I need you to pass this on and wait for instructions. The hologram cuts. Padmé's watching him from across the room. She has been watching him since dawn, with the quiet attention of someone revising a working theory in real time. He said wait for instructions, she said. He did. You're not going to wait. Anakin looks at the now dark projector. R2. How long to Geonosis at maximum? R2-D2, stationed near the doorway with the alert posture of a droid who has been following this conversation closely despite having no ears in any biological sense, lets out a single affirmative whistle. 4 hours, Anakin translates. He is already moving toward the rack where he'd left his outer robe. We leave in 10 minutes. Padmé picks up her bag from the floor beside her. She'd packed it, Anakin notes before he answered. The approach to Geonosis from the northwestern quadrant takes them low over the asteroid debris field that rings the system's outer belt, and Anakin flies it with the casual. Total competence of someone who has run this approach before, not in this life, but in one he carries in his hands like old handwriting. He cuts the engine signature down to a whisper at the outer marker, bleeds the heat signature through a venting cycle, and slides them into the shadow of the largest asteroid in the field with the precision of a key entering a lock. Padmé is in the co-pilot seat. She watches his hands on the controls. You've flown this before, she says. Not a question. Something like it. There's no standard approach that looks like what you just did. No, he agrees. There isn't. She lets it sit. She is learning, he thinks, to hold questions she doesn't yet have the context for, setting them in a row. Patient. Waiting for the moment when the answers will make them make sense. The surface of Geonosis below them is a study in the color of dried blood, ochre rock and rust shadow, and the distant glint of processing machinery catching the system's sun. The hive spires rise from the canyon formations in clusters, organic and architectural at once. The product of a species that builds the way other species breathe, involuntarily, continuously, without separation between the structure and the builder. The factory floor is in the eastern canyon, Anakin says, pulling up the terrain overlay on the nav display. That's where they'll want us to go. Where canon, he stops. Rephrases, where instinct would push us. Noise, activity, the obvious route in. We're not going there. Padmé leans forward to look at the overlay. The catacombs. Western approach, subterranean. The Geonosians use them for material transport. They're wide enough for 2 people walking abreast, and they connect to the detention block through a secondary junction here. His finger traces the route on the display with the specificity of a man reading a map he has memorized in a different lifetime. There will be guards at these 2 junctions, 4 at the primary, 2 at the secondary. Standard rotation, they cycle every 20 minutes. Padmé is very still beside him. Anakin? You know the guard rotation for the detention block of a facility you have never visited. A beat. I'll explain everything. I promised you I would, and I will. Just not while we're 60 seconds from touchdown on enemy ground. He holds his gaze for a moment, then looks back at the display with the expression of someone adding another item to a very long list. Fine, she says. But the explanation had better be extraordinary. It is, he says. I genuinely wish it weren't. The catacomb entrance is a crack in the canyon wall that looks, from outside, like a stress fracture in the rock face. Natural, unimportant, the kind of thing a survey team would mark and move past. Anakin squeezes through it without hesitation, and Padmé follows. And then the rock closes around them, and they are in the dark. Not complete dark. The Geonosians have installed bioluminescent marker strips along the transport corridors. A faint, greenish light that does just enough to navigate by and nothing more. The ceiling is low and the walls are close, and the sound changes immediately. the surface wind drops away, replaced by the subsonic drone of distant machinery and the clicking, chittering ambient noise of a hive at work. Somewhere far below them and to the right, something enormous is moving on tracks. They move without speaking. This is, Anakin reflects, one of the genuine gifts of the life he's carried back with him. He has learned the specific discipline of silence. Not the forced silence of someone suppressing the urge to fill space, but the natural silence of someone who has operated alone in hostile environments long enough that quiet has become his native register. He moves through the catacomb with his hand just touching the left wall, not for balance, but for orientation, and counts the junctions as they pass. 1, 2. At the third junction, he stops. He holds up a closed fist and Padmé stops immediately behind him, close enough that he can hear her breathing. Controlled, deliberate. The breath pattern of someone trained for exactly this kind of situation. Senator she may be, but she was a queen first, and before that a child soldier, and she has never been as fragile as people who underestimate her need her to be. Through the junction wall, through the rock and the bioluminescent strip and 8 inches of Geonosian construction, he can feel them. 4 presences, bored and warm and drowsy in the specific way of guards 2 hours from rotation change. He reaches out with the force, very lightly, and nudges the drowsiness. Not a command, not a compulsion. A suggestion the size of a breath. You are tired. The corridor is quiet. Nothing is moving. Each one of the 4 guards settles fractionally deeper into their post positions. One leans against the wall. One stops shifting his weight. Anakin moves through the junction in 12 seconds. Padmé follows in 8. They do not look at each other until the next corridor swallows them. And then, Padmé leans close and murmurs, barely above silence, "You put them to sleep." I encouraged a pre-existing tendency. Is there a meaningful difference? Philosophically, yes. Practically, probably not. A sound from somewhere ahead. A door, mechanical, cycling through its opening sequence. They press flat against the wall and the sound passes. And they keep moving. Obi-Wan Kenobi is suspended from the ceiling of the detention chamber by his wrists, which are bound to a retractable cable above a raised platform. The platform is ringed with energy binders at the base. He is, from every observable indicator, entirely fine, the posture of a man who has decided that since he cannot currently do anything about his situation, he may as well wait it out with maximum dignity. He looks up when the ventilation grate in the wall opposite opens. Anakin drops out of it and lands without a sound. Padmé comes through after him and hangs from the edge for a half-second before dropping, and Obi-Wan watches all of this with an expression that is working very hard at neutrality, and not quite achieving it. "Took you long enough," he said. "You said to wait for instructions. You never wait for instructions. First time for everything." Anakin crosses to the binder column and examines it without touching it, reading it, the specific geometry of its power coupling. He reaches into his kit and pulls a slicing tool he'd taken from the homestead's maintenance kit. And 30 seconds of precise work later the binders drop. Obi-Wan rolls his wrists as the cable retracts. He looks at Anakin. Something in the look is different from what Anakin remembers of his old master. Not the expression itself, which is the same composed, slightly ironic thing it has always been, but what's operating underneath it. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a Jedi Master who reads people the way other people read text, and what he is reading in Anakin right now is giving him what appears to be genuine difficulty. "Anakin," he said. Quiet, level the voice he reserves for things that actually concern him. "You're not acting like yourself." "I know. That's not entirely a complaint." A careful pause. "But it's not entirely not one either." Anakin looks at him. 37 years of another man's memory look back through his eyes, and Obi-Wan, who has trained him since he was 9 years old and knows every register of his face, goes very slightly still. "I'll explain everything," Anakin says. "I promise. When we're out." "And Dooku?" "He's here. I know where he is." He moves toward the corridor door, checking the junction beyond it through the Force. Clear for now, for approximately another 4 minutes before the secondary rotation cycles back. "And I know how the next hour goes, if we let it go the way it wants to." "How does it want to go?" Anakin glances back at him. "Badly," he said. We're going to do it differently. He opens the door. The catacombs open into a vaulted chamber 300 meters below the hive's main floor. It was not on any schematic Anakin had shown Padmé. It exists in the specific category of spaces that powerful people carve out for themselves in other people's structures. Private, accessible only through routes that don't appear in official layouts. Furnished with the kind of deliberate spareness that announces taste rather than necessity. A single light source, overhead, throws the chamber's angles into sharp relief. The floor is smooth Geonosian stone, worn flat by something older than the current occupant. Along the far wall, a holographic display array shows troop disposition maps in miniature, hundreds of them. A war laid out in blue light. Count Dooku stands with his back to them. He is looking at the maps. He does not turn around when they enter, which means he knew they were coming. Which means this room is exactly what it appears to be, not a place they found, but a place they were allowed to find. I wondered, he said, which of you would come? His voice is a cello, deep, resonant, carrying the particular authority of a man who has never had to raise it to be obeyed. He turns, finally, and the face is what it always is in Anakin's memory. Aristocratic, composed, the faintest architecture of condescension built into its resting state. I expected Master Kenobi. You, young Skywalker, are a surprise. I get that a lot lately, Anakin said. Dooku's eyes move between the three of them. Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padmé positioned to the left near the chamber's secondary exit, and perform their calculation with the speed of long practice. He is, under the theatrics, a tactician. He is reading the room. Senator Amidala. A slight inclination of the head, impeccably courteous. I regret the circumstances. I'm sure, Padmé said. He looks back at Anakin. Something has shifted in the calculation, a variable he has registered but not yet categorized. You navigated the catacombs without a schematic. The guard rotation at the secondary junction is classified above Master Kenobi's clearance level. A pause, genuinely curious. How? I've been here before, Anakin said. You have not. Not yet. He unclips his lightsaber from his belt. Unhurried, this can go one of two ways, Count. I genuinely prefer the one where nobody loses an arm. Dooku moves first. This, too, is familiar. The opening of his Makashi form is always the same, has been refined across decades into something close to geometric perfection. The precise angled step. The blade coming up in the high guard position with the wrist rotated to present the minimum target surface, the weight distributed back onto the rear foot to open the distance for the counter lunge that is the form's primary weapon. It is elegant. It is extraordinarily dangerous. It has ended a very large number of fights very quickly. Anakin steps forward instead of back. The counter lunge requires distance. Makashi is a form built on the assumption that an opponent will do what every instinct and every standard lightsaber training doctrine says to do when a blade comes at them. Retreat. Create space. Fight from range. Gemso does not retreat. Gemso closes. Their blades meet in the first lock with a crack that rings off the stone walls. And Dooku feels it immediately. The weight behind the parry, the angle of force application, the grip. Not the grip of a 19-year-old apprentice. The grip of a man who has spent decades making his hands into weapons and has not forgotten how. He disengages and resets, fast, and the composed face has acquired a fine line of attention between the brows. The second exchange is longer. Dooku probes, the classic Makashi sequence of feint and counter, designed to open a gap in the opponent's defense through accumulated small pressures, rather than a single decisive blow. Each probe meets the same answer. Wait. Control. The blade in Anakin's hand meeting each incoming strike at the optimal deflection angle and redirecting it without drama. Without the exaggerated full-body movements of a young fighter overcommitting to blocks. The parries are minimal, efficient, expensive for Dooku in a way that precise, economical forms almost never are. Stay back, Anakin said without looking at Obi-Wan behind him. A beat of silence. Then, he's going to try the... I know what he's going to try. A short sidestep, weight forward, that cuts off Dooku's angle toward the left flank. Stay back. Obi-Wan stays back. The sound he makes is not quite a word. Dooku reassesses. He is not. He acknowledges to himself in the fraction of a second the form allows for such acknowledgments. Fighting Anakin Skywalker. He is fighting someone who is wearing Anakin Skywalker. Which is a meaningfully different problem. The body is the same. The height, the reach, the raw physical capability he had already catalogued from Council dossier. But the mind governing it is a stranger's. The footwork is too deliberate. The blade economy is too mature. There is no emotional escalation, no building desperation. No point at which the fighter's technique has begun to fray, because the fighter's composure has frayed first. He cannot find the anger. The boy is, in his experience, constitutionally incapable of sustained combat without the anger surfacing. It is his fuel, his accelerant, the thing that makes him genuinely dangerous and genuinely exploitable in equal measure. He had planned for it. He had a line prepared for the moment it crested, a careful appeal to the same seam Sidious had been quietly widening for years. There is no anger. There is something else entirely, a quality of attention that is neither the hot focus of a young man fighting for his life, nor the cold calculation of a Sith. It is the attention of someone who has already seen how this ends, and is executing accordingly. Present and distant at once, like a man watching himself from a high window. It is, Dooku thinks, genuinely unsettling. He commits to the sequence he has held in reserve, the Makashi pressure chain, 7 beat, designed to force an overextension in the 4th beat and create the opening for the crippling diagonal cut on the 5th. It has worked against masters. It is the finest thing he knows how to do with a blade. Anakin reads the 1st beat. Not anticipated reads. In the moment, the way a musician hears the next note in a phrase before it's played because they know the composer's grammar. He steps inside the 2nd beat instead of engaging it, and his blade locks with Dooku's at the hilt, and he drives forward with his shoulder and his weight, and Dooku goes back a full step for the first time. The 3rd beat never arrives. Anakin has taken the sequence apart at the 2nd measure and is now simply pressing. Forward. Always forward. The relentless gemso weight that denies Makashi the breathing room it requires to function, pinning Dooku against the chamber's curved wall with nowhere for the elegant backward footwork to go. The wall arrives at Dooku's shoulders and he feels the stone, and he performs the disengagement, a textbook break, the only clean exit remaining, and it is perfectly executed, and it is not enough. Anakin's blade comes around in a tight controlled arc and takes the lightsaber from Dooku's hand at the grip. Not the hand. The grip. The saber spins across the chamber floor and comes to rest against the base of the holographic display array, where the blue light of 100 war maps plays across its inert surface. Dooku's hand is whole. His arm is whole. He stands against the wall with both hands empty, and the blade of a 19-year-old boy's lightsaber 3 inches from his sternum, and a long, empty moment opens up between them. Anakin powers the saber down. He clips it back to his belt. Both hands, he said quietly, almost to himself. All right. Dooku stands very still. He is studying the face in front of him with an expression that has moved well past composure into something rarer, genuine uncertainty. The face of a man whose map has just been shown to be a map of a different country entirely. He is looking for the boy. He keeps not finding him. Who are you? Dooku said. Not an accusation. A real question. Someone who's already lived the alternative. Anakin reaches for the restraint cuffs on his belt. On your wrists, please. A pause. Then, with the specific controlled dignity of a man choosing compliance over the appearance of submission, Dooku extends his wrists. Whatever you think you've prevented, he said, as the cuffs close, Sidious plans beyond. I know his plans. Anakin checks the cuff seal. All of them. We'll talk about that. Not here. He glances at Obi-Wan, then at Padmé by the door. Time to go. Obi-Wan is looking at him the way a man looks at something he has misidentified repeatedly, and is only now beginning to see correctly. The expression is somewhere between relief and the specific unease of having all one's assumptions quietly removed. Dooku allows himself to be led toward the corridor. At the entrance, he pauses once, looking back at the chamber, at the blue war maps arrayed in their silent hundreds along the wall, at a future he had spent years building. Then, he looks at Anakin. The eyes that look back at him are not young. They are not old. They are something the Count of Sereno, former Jedi Master, student of the dark side for 2 decades, has no category for. He looks away first. The ship hums. It is a low, constant sound, the hyperdrive motivator cycling through its transit rhythm, the kind of noise that fills a cabin without demanding attention, background to everything and noticed by nothing except the part of the mind that registers the moment it stops. The common area of the transport is small, a fixed table bolted to the deck, 4 seats, overhead lighting set to half power because nobody reached up to change it when they boarded. Through the viewport, hyperspace moves in its pale, featureless stream. Dooku is in the hold. Secured, quiet, the 3 of them sit around the table. Nobody has spoken since the jump to hyperspace. Obi-Wan has his hands folded on the table's surface and is looking at them with the focused non-expression of a man doing a great deal of internal work he is not yet ready to externalize. Padmé has a cup of something warm between her palms and is looking at Anakin. Anakin is looking at the viewport. Obi-Wan speaks first. You knew the guard rotation. Yes, you knew the chamber. The layout, the secondary catacomb junction that isn't on any publicly available schematic and shouldn't be in any Jedi intelligence file I've had access to. Yes, you fought Dooku. A pause. I have fought Dooku. What you did in that chamber was not. He stops. Reorganizes Anakin. I have been your master for 10 years. I know your fighting as well as I know my own. What I watched in that chamber was not something you learned from me. Anakin turns from the viewport. No, he said. It isn't. He looks at Obi-Wan for a moment. At this face he has 2 complete sets of memories of, one from a boyhood and one from a vigil on black sand, and the weight of both is considerable. Everything I'm about to tell you is true. I need you to hold that, because none of it is going to sound true. Obi-Wan meets his eyes. All right. All of it. Anakin said again. Even the parts that are about you. A beat of something moves across Obi-Wan's face that is quickly contained. He nods. Anakin leans forward and puts his hands flat on the table, and begins. Padmé and I are married. He starts here deliberately. The smallest thing. The thing that will be easiest to believe and hardest to dismiss. The foundation before the structure. He watches Padmé's face do something complicated and private, a recalibration happening behind her eyes at a speed most people couldn't follow. We were married in secret, he continues. On Naboo, after Geonosis, in the original version of events. Obi-Wan's brow moves fractionally. The original version. The version that already happened. The version I lived through. He looks at them both. I'm not 19 years old. I mean, this body is 19. But I'm not. I died at 45, on board a space station, above Endor, and when my mother died in that tent on Tatooine, I woke up here instead. A pause, giving them the shape of it before the details arrive. Everything that's happened in the last 4 days. The homestead, Geonosis, Dooku. None of that happened this way the first time. The silence that follows is not the silence of disbelief. It is the silence of 2 very intelligent people rapidly processing load-bearing new information. Padmé sets her cup down. What did happen? The first time? You were on Geonosis. Both of you. There was an execution arena. Dooku had the 3 of us sentenced to death by arena creature. We fought our way out. The clone army arrived. He watches her face. I lost my arm. Right arm severed at the elbow by Dooku during the duel. I was reckless. I went in angry and he used it. He looks at his right hand on the table. Flesh, whole, 19 years old. Padmé and I married in secret immediately after, because the code forbids attachment and I couldn't. He stops. I wasn't willing to lose you. I made everything into a secret instead of a choice. Padmé is very still. We're married. In another life. I'd like to do it properly this time. A beat. If that's something you'd want, you'll have the full picture before you answer. She looks at him. Continue, she said. He builds it in layers. The Clone Wars, 3 years of it. The campaigns and the casualties, the slow erosion of the Republic from within while the Senate applauded the man doing the eroding. He gives them the shape of it rather than every battle, the shape of a trap, patient and total, closing over the course of years. Then the name. Palpatine is Darth Sidious. He says it plainly, without construction or preamble, because there is no way to soften the structural load of that sentence, and attempting to would only make it harder to hold. Obi-Wan goes completely still, not the controlled stillness of composure, the stillness of a system processing something that doesn't fit any existing category. His hands on the table do not move. His breathing continues, measured, but the quality of it changes. He recruited me, Anakin continues. Over years. He started when I was 9. A kind old man who took an interest, who understood me when the Council didn't, who told me I was special and the Jedi were afraid of my power. He was very good at it. He holds Obi-Wan's gaze. He told me the Jedi were going to betray the Republic. He told me you were going to betray me. He offered me a way to save Padmé from dying in childbirth. She died anyway, because of what I did trying to prevent it. And I. He stops. The sentence requires a different kind of breath to finish. I became Darth Vader. I helped him destroy the Order. I was there when the temple burned. He doesn't look away from Obi-Wan. You fought me on Mustafar. You won. I burned. And he put me in a suit, and I spent 23 years being his weapon until my son gave me a reason to stop. The cabin holds the words. Obi-Wan's eyes are bright. Not wet. He will not permit wet. Not yet. Perhaps not in this room, but bright. With the specific brightness of someone absorbing grief at a speed the body wasn't designed for. He looks like a man who has been handed the bill for a meal he never ordered and is doing the math. The temple, he said. His voice is perfectly level. This is the most frightening thing about it. The younglings. Yes. Obi-Wan closes his eyes. Opens them. I need to. He stops. Give me a moment. Take it. He takes it. Padmé's watching him with the specific careful attention she reserves for people in pain, who haven't yet decided whether to acknowledge it. And she says nothing. Which is the correct thing. After a moment, Obi-Wan looks up. You said your son, Luke, and a daughter Leia, Padmé's children. They were born and she died and I didn't know about them for 23 years. He looks at Padmé. The knowledge sits in his chest like a stone. You're pregnant now. Or you will be soon. It was twins. Padmé's breath catches. Just once. She controls it. That, she said carefully, is a significant piece of information. I know. You could have led with that. I needed you to understand the full shape of it first. The children are the reason everything matters. They're the reason I'm not. I'm not going to be who I was. This time. I need you to know the whole architecture before you decide what to do with any of it. The silence that follows is different from the silences before it. Populated. This one. Full of things being quietly restructured. Obi-Wan reaches out with the Force. It is not an intrusive probe. It is the lightest possible application of what Jedi call receptive sense, the capacity to read the emotional signature of a statement against the Force resonance of the speaker. Truth has a different texture than construction. In his experience, it is unmistakable once you know what you're feeling for. And he has 20 years of knowing what Anakin Skywalker's Force signature feels like when he is telling the truth, when he is concealing something, when he is afraid. What he is feeling now is none of those things. What he is feeling is old, grief-worn and certain and absolutely, structurally, bedrock true. He withdraws the sense. You're telling the truth, he said, not a question. Yes. Obi-Wan nods slowly, the nod of a man accepting a weight he cannot put down and has decided not to try. Palpatine. He tastes the name differently now. Anakin can see it. Examining it for the hollow at its center, finding it. How long has he? Decades. He was Sidious before the blockade of Naboo. Possibly longer. He lets that land. He has been Chancellor, Sith Lord, and the architect of everything simultaneously. The war we almost just fought was his. Both sides. Obi-Wan looks at the table for a long moment. When he looks up, something has resolved in his face. Not peace, but direction. The expression of a man who has absorbed the worst of it and arrived at the first question that matters. "What do we do," he said, "about Palpatine?" Anakin meets his eyes. "We take him apart," he said. "Carefully, together, with evidence. A beat. I know exactly how he built it. Which means I know exactly where the seams are. The hyperdrive hums. Coruscant waits, several hours ahead, at the end of a pale, featureless stream of faster-than-light transit. Obi-Wan looks at Padmé. Padmé looks at Anakin. "All right," Obi-Wan said quietly. "Then tell us where to start." The Jedi Temple detention level smells of recycled air and stone. Not unpleasant. The Temple's environmental systems are meticulous. But there is a quality to it that exists nowhere else in the building. A specific flatness to the atmosphere, as though the air itself has been processed of anything unnecessary. Sound behaves differently down here too. The corridors absorb it. Footsteps that would ring on the upper levels simply stop at the point of contact, swallowed by the composite flooring, and the effect is of moving through a space where the normal physics of noise have been quietly renegotiated. Anakin walks ahead. Obi-Wan keeps pace at his left shoulder. Behind them, the turbolift closes. The politics had taken 4 hours, not the arrival. The arrival had been managed efficiently. The transport docking without incident. Dooku transferred to Temple custody under Obi-Wan's authority before the Chancellor's office had fully processed the report of his capture. That part had moved quickly, as things move quickly when the people executing them know exactly which channels to use and which to avoid. The 4 hours had been the aftermath. Master Windu, in a secured briefing room on the 7th floor, with his hands folded and his face doing what Mace Windu's face does when he is receiving information that conflicts with his operational model, not denying it. Never that, but stress-testing it visibly, applying pressure to each joint to find where it gives. He had asked Obi-Wan 14 questions. He had asked Anakin 3, and the 3 he asked were the ones that mattered most, which told Anakin everything about how Windu's mind worked that he'd already known. Yoda had said very little. He sat at the curved end of the briefing table and watched Anakin with eyes that were nearly 900 years old, and had seen, in those long centuries, most of what sentient beings were capable of doing to themselves and each other. He did not reach out with the Force, as Obi-Wan had done on the ship. He simply watched, with the quality of attention that required nothing from its object. And after a long while he said, "Changed. You have." "Yes, deeply, yes, Master," Anakin said. "Carry something old, you do. In young bones." A pause. "Painful. This must be." "Sometimes," Anakin said. Yoda had nodded, slowly, and said nothing more on the subject. The decision had been straightforward. In the end, Dooku would remain in Temple custody. The Chancellor's office would be told a version of the truth, captured, secured, pending investigation, that was accurate in its components and misleading in its completeness. Padmé had navigated that particular communication herself, in a transmission from the briefing room, with the fluent precision of someone who has spent her entire adult life saying true things in arrangements that produced false impressions in service of outcomes she believed in. Anakin had watched her work and thought, this is who she is at full capacity, and it is extraordinary. Then Windu had looked at him and said, "The Chancellor will want to see you." "I know," Anakin said. "Not yet." Windu's eyes had narrowed. "That isn't." "Not yet," Obi-Wan said quietly from his chair. Windu had looked at him. Something passed between them that Anakin didn't have the full context for, some current of old trust and collegial weight, and Windu had said, finally, 48 hours. That had been 4 hours ago. The cell is a standard temple detention configuration. Energy barrier across the front face, interior lit to functional levels, a bench along the rear wall, a water dispenser. Dooku sits on the bench with his legs crossed at the ankle and his hands resting in his lap and his eyes on the middle distance. And he looks exactly as he would look waiting for a performance to begin at an opera house on Coruscant. The aristocratic composure is entirely intact. It is, Anakin thinks, genuinely impressive, the kind of equanimity that is either very deep or very practiced, and in Dooku's case, is probably both. He looks up when Anakin steps through the barrier. Obi-Wan remains outside, This was agreed. No council oversight, Dooku observed. Interesting. They're occupied. Anakin takes the room's single chair and sets it in front of the bench and sits. How are you? A fractional pause. I'm sorry? It's a straightforward question. Dooku studies him. You are a very peculiar young man. You're the third person to tell me something like that this week. Anakin leans forward, forearms on his knees. I'm going to tell you something, Count. The same thing I told Obi-Wan and Padmé on the ship. And I need you to listen to all of it before you decide what it means. I find myself with a surfeit of time. Good, he does not soften it for Dooku. There is no version of this that benefits from softening. Dooku is not a man who responds to cushioning. And more to the point, he is a man who spent 30 years as a Jedi and knows the difference between truth and the performance of truth at a cellular level. What he needs is specificity, detail that only a witness carries. So Anakin gives him the war. Not the broad strokes, the specific texture of it. The banking clan financing both sides through intermediary shells. The separatist leadership believing they were building leverage and being used as kindling instead. The clones and the chips and the mechanism of Order 66 explained with the precision of someone who spent 2 decades living in its aftermath, walking through the corridors of a galaxy it had unmade. And then Dooku's own ending. He told me to kill you, Anakin said. Above Coruscant, you were captured. A rescue mission. A trap he'd arranged on both ends. You were on your knees, disarmed, and he told me to execute you. He holds Dooku's gaze. I did. The silence that follows is a particular kind. Dooku's face has not moved. But something behind it has. Some internal arrangement of assumptions has shifted, and the shift is visible the way the movement of deep water is visible from the surface, not the thing itself, but the sign of it. He gave the order, Dooku said, without hesitation. You were already obsolete to him. You'd delivered the war. You'd given him the justification for the clone army, and Grievous was functional enough to continue the military theater. You were a liability with too much knowledge. Grievous. The name lands differently in Dooku's mouth than it would in most people's, with the specific weight of long familiarity. He had made Grievous into what he was. He knew exactly what that comparison meant. And, after me? After you, Grievous. After Grievous. Me? Eventually, the Sith rule of 2 isn't loyalty. It's a waiting list. He leans back slightly. You were never his partner, Count. You were a very expensive, very capable tool. He appreciated the quality. He always planned to put you down when the job was finished. Dooku is quiet for a long moment. He looks at his own hands in his lap, the hands of a man who was once a Jedi Master, who walked away from an order he believed had failed the galaxy, who chose a different path because he was certain the path he'd found was the true one. Grievous. Me. All of us. He said finally, spare parts for his war. Yes, the words are his own arriving back at him, and they land with the specific weight of things a man has suspected and refused to finish thinking. You want the financial records, Dooku said. Not a question. And the comm logs. The direct channel to his private office, not the Chancellor's office, the channel that bypasses the Senate's routing architecture entirely. The banking clan trails through the intergalactic intermediary accounts. He meets Dooku's eyes. Everything that shows 2 signatures on the same war. Dooku looks at him for a long time. The aristocratic composure has not left his face, but it is wearing differently now, not armor, but habit. The face a man makes, because he has made it for so long he no longer knows the other one. Why, he said, would I give you that? Because you were a Jedi once, Anakin said. Because whatever you decided to become afterward, that part of you could still read a man and know when he was lying. So read me. He opens his hands, both of them, on his knees, an old gesture, a Jedi gesture, offering transparency. I'm not here for justice. I'm not here for the Council or the Chancellor or the Republic's legal apparatus. I'm here because millions of clones are walking around with a chip in their skull that will make them kill everyone I've ever cared about on one man's command. And I need to stop it. and I cannot stop it without the evidence that proves who gave the order to build the army in the first place. Dooku looks at the open hands. He looks at the face above them. There is a munificent class account, he said. Registered to a shell corporation, CNR derivatives, outer rim filing, Ariadu registry. His voice is measured, each word placed with deliberate care. The controlling signature on the account traces, through 2 intermediaries, to a private Senate discretionary fund. The fund's authorization code was signed by the Supreme Chancellor's personal cipher. Anakin doesn't reach for anything. He commits it to memory, the way he has committed everything that matters in this life, not to data pads, not to systems that can be accessed and erased, but to the inside of his own skull. The comm logs, Dooku continued, are archived on a server inside the Confederate command ship currently in orbit above Geonosis. Command access code Delta 7 Auric 9. The channel identifier is Shinar Umbra. Thank you, Anakin said. Dooku looks away toward the energy barrier and the corridor beyond it. Don't, he said. I'm not doing this for you. I know. Whatever I was, he said, to the barrier, to the recycled air, to something that isn't in the room, I was not meant to be a spare part. Anakin stands. He replaces the chair against the wall with the same quiet economy with which he does everything now, and moves toward the barrier. No, he said. You weren't. He steps through. Obi-Wan falls into step beside him without a word, and the detention corridor swallows their footsteps, and behind them Dooku sits alone in the flat light, with his hands in his lap and something rearranged permanently behind his eyes. Kamino announces itself before it is visible. The system's outer approach carries a particular quality of gray, not the gray of storm systems or debris fields, but something more fundamental, a gray that belongs to the light itself, as though the star here generates illumination without warmth, without color, without the suggestion that any of this was designed with comfort in mind. Then the planet resolves through the viewport, and it is exactly as Anakin remembers it. A perfect sphere of ocean, uninterrupted from pole to pole, its surface a heaving pewter expanse broken only by the white spire clusters of the cities that rise from the water on stilts too slender for their height, the whole arrangement suggesting something between architecture and desperation. Rain moves across the viewport in horizontal sheets. He brought R2, no one else. The conversation with Obi-Wan had been brief and, by their new standards, remarkably uncomplicated. You're going alone, Obi-Wan said. It was not a question. He had spent a week recalibrating his relationship to questions, learning which of Anakin's statements were invitations to discussion, and which were simply information. You and Windu are better positioned here. Dooku's evidence needs handling. The Confederate server needs a retrieval team before the Separatist command structure realizes he's been captured and rotates the access codes. That's a 48-hour window at most. Anakin had pulled on his jacket, unhurried. Palpatine will be making moves. He knows something is wrong. He doesn't know what yet, but he's not the kind of man who waits to find out. You need to be here when that starts. And Kamino. Kamino is one person, one console, and institutional access the Kaminoans will grant to a Jedi on Republic business without significant resistance. He looked at Obi-Wan. I know what I'm looking for. I know where it is. And I need to do this one alone, for reasons that aren't about competence or trust. Obi-Wan had held his gaze for a moment. The chips. Yes, a pause. All right, Obi-Wan said. And then, Anakin. He stopped. Whatever he'd intended to say reorganized itself. Be careful. I will. That's new, Obi-Wan said. I find I prefer it. Tipoca City rises from the ocean on its pillar legs with the faint air of a structure that is perpetually surprised to still be standing. The docking bay accepts the ship without ceremony. Jedi craft are expected here. The Republic's relationship with Kamino's cloning operations being what it is, and a Kaminoan attendant is waiting at the bay entrance before the landing ramp fully extends. They are tall, the Kaminoans. They move like water moves, with a fluidity that belongs to something without bones, though they have bones. Slender ones, suited to a world where the primary physical challenge is wind rather than gravity. Their faces are long and pale, and their eyes are large and dark, and their voices carry the particular measured cadence of a species that has never found cause to hurry. "Jedi Skywalker," the attendant said. "We were not informed of your visit." "It was urgent and unscheduled," Anakin said. "I apologize for the short notice. I need access to the central genetic database, specifically the clone inhibitor architecture." He produces his credentials, the formal temple seal on a data chip. "Republic Security Directive, active investigation." The attendant takes the chip with 2 fingers and examines it with an attention that is thorough without being hostile. Kaminoans are not suspicious by nature, they are precise, which is a different thing. Their concern is accuracy, not deception. The distinction matters. "The inhibitor architecture is a restricted subsystem," the attendant said. "Access requires authorization from Prime Minister Lama Su." "Of course," Anakin said. "Could you arrange that?" "I will inquire." A slight inclination of the long head. "Please wait." He waits. R2 makes a soft, low sound beside him. Not a comment, exactly, but the droid equivalent of "I'm here." Anakin looks out through the corridor's curved, transparent wall at the ocean, which is doing what Kamino's ocean always does. Everything at once, in all directions, without pause. 12 minutes later, the attendant returns. "Prime Minister Lama Su will see you." Lama Su's office overlooks the water on 3 sides, the walls almost entirely transparent, so that sitting inside it feels like sitting inside the weather. He is taller than the attendant and older in the particular Kaminoan way, not aged exactly, but settled, the way stone settles when it has been in one place long enough to belong there. "Jedi Skywalker." He gestures to the chair across his desk. "A security directive for the inhibitor subsystem is unusual. The situation that prompted it is unusual," Anakin said, sitting. "I'll be direct with you, Prime Minister, because I think you'll find that more efficient than the alternative. The inhibitor chips in your clone soldiers were not designed by the Republic. They were designed at the directive of a third party, who used Republic channels to authorize them without Republic oversight. I need access to the architecture to understand the mechanism and implement a corrective patch." Lama Su looks at him. His dark eyes are unreadable in the way that large eyes often are. Too much surface area, not enough familiar structure to map emotion onto. That is a significant claim. I have documentation. The financial trail is being compiled by Jedi and Senate investigators on Coruscant as we speak. He holds the Prime Minister's gaze. The inhibitor function is currently coded represents a security liability for the Republic and a legal liability for Kamino. I'm not here to assign blame. The Kaminoans were given fraudulent authorization documentation, and that's a matter of record. I'm here to fix the problem. Lama Su is quiet for a moment. Then, the inhibitor subsystem access will require my personal authorization code and biometric confirmation. I understand. I will accompany you to the console. I'd welcome that. It is not what he'd planned for, a solo infiltration being considerably simpler than a supervised access scenario. But it is, he reflects, probably the better outcome. Kaminoan cooperation on record is worth more than a clean hack no one can officially acknowledge. The genetics laboratory is 3 levels below the administrative complex. Accessible by a lift that descends through the city's central column past floors of incubation chambers, row upon row of growth tanks, lit from within, the faint outlines of figures suspended in pale fluid. Anakin does not look at them directly. He looks at the wall. The console is a curved workstation at the center of a circular room, surrounded by the soft hum of processing servers. Lama Su inputs his authorization in a sequence Anakin doesn't try to observe, professional courtesy, and strategically sensible. The system opens. The inhibitor architecture is in the tertiary behavior modification partition, Lama Su said, stepping back. I will observe. Anakin sits at the console. The partition opens under his hands, and the architecture is exactly where his memory said it would be. Nested inside the standard aggression modulation coding, invisible unless you know what you're looking for, which he does, with the specific precision of a man who spent 23 years living inside the world its activation produced. The chip code is elegant. He hates that it's elegant, hates the craft of it, the patience, the decades of planning made visible in a few lines of behavior modification syntax. He doesn't rush. He works through the architecture the way he works through everything now, methodically, without the impatience that used to cost him, reading the inhibitor function first, mapping its trigger structure. Understanding what the patch needs to do before writing a single line of it. The trigger is a command code broadcast from a specific encrypted Senate channel. Remove the receiver's ability to authenticate that specific encryption signature, and the command becomes noise. Indistinguishable from background. The patch takes 40 minutes to write. At minute 23, a door opens behind him. Prime Minister. A Kaminoan technician, young, with the slightly unformed quality of someone who hasn't been in their role long enough to have settled into it. The evening rotation briefing. She stops. Looks at Anakin. Jedi Skywalker is conducting a Republic security audit, Lama Su said. The briefing can wait. A pause. The technician's large eyes move from Lama Su to Anakin to the console and back to Lama Su. Of course, she said. I apologize for the interruption. The door closes. Anakin's hands don't stop moving. At minute 40, he runs the verification sequence. The patch compiles clean. He looks at it for a moment, this small block of corrective code, 40 minutes of work, and thinks about what it represents, what it undoes, the specific morning in another life when the clones around him stopped being soldiers and became something else entirely in the space of a single broadcast. He thinks about the younglings. He deploys the patch. The upload bar moves across the screen in silence, and the servers hum, and Lama Su watches from across the room. And the rain drives against the city's transparent walls and horizontal sheets, and somewhere in the progress bar's slow rightward crawl every clone in the Grand Army receives, quietly and without knowing it, the return of something that was taken from them before they were born. The bar completes. Anakin sits back from the console. He is not, precisely, relieved. Relief implies the lifting of weight, and the weight of what he's undone is not something a progress bar resolves. But something in the room is different than it was 40 minutes ago, and he sits with that for a moment before standing. The audit is complete, he said. I'll need a copy of the access log for the investigation record. Of course, Lama Su said. He is watching Anakin with the particular attention of a man who has understood more of the conversation than he's acknowledged aloud. The log transfers to Anakin's data chip. Downstairs, in the levels below, in row upon row of pale-lit tanks, the next generation of soldiers floats in their fluid without knowing that the specific shape of their future has just been quietly, permanently changed. Outside, the ocean does what it always does. The rain doesn't stop. On Kamino, it never does. The office is exactly as it always is. Curved walls, the Senate dome visible through the viewport like a great stone eye, the desk positioned with the precise calculation of a man who understands that the physical arrangement of a room is itself a form of argument. The lighting is warm. The furniture is old, selected for the specific message that old things send in rooms where power is negotiated: continuity, legitimacy, the suggestion of an institution rather than an individual. Palpatine has spent 40 years understanding how rooms work on people, and this room works very well. He is signing a document when it happens. The stylus moves across the flimsoplast in his characteristic script, small, precise, the handwriting of a man who learned to write when writing was considered a discipline rather than a convenience. And then it stops. Not a decision. A stop, the way a clock stops, mid-motion, between one beat and the next, because something has interrupted the mechanism. He sets the stylus down. Outside the viewport, Coruscant moves through its permanent manufactured twilight, the city planet's 10 trillion inhabitants conducting the endless business of existing at a density that should be impossible, and has simply decided not to be. The Senate dome catches the ambient light of 10,000 lower city glow panels. A transport moves across the view, silent behind the transparent steel, its running lights blinking their patient rhythm. Palpatine looks at his own hand on the desk. The disturbance is not loud. It never is. For him, he has cultivated his force perception across 7 decades into something closer to a physician's sense than a warrior's, diagnostic rather than reactive. He does not feel the force as pressure or heat or the combat-ready alert that younger practitioners describe. He feels it as information, shifts in probability, changes in the texture of what is likely to happen next. What he feels now is an absence. Anakin Skywalker has been, for 11 years, a held note in the Force, that Palpatine has kept one part of his attention on the way a conductor keeps one ear on the section he intends to bring in. The boy's signature is enormous and unmistakable, raw power in quantities that the Jedi Council measures in clinical terms, and that Palpatine has always understood in more practical ones. It has been, from the beginning, his primary instrument, tuned over years to exactly the frequency he needed. The note has not gone silent. That would be simpler. It has changed key. Same instrument, same extraordinary volume, same fundamental signature that Palpatine has monitored and mapped, and carefully shaped across a decade. But the quality underneath it is different, and the difference is, he reaches for the right framework, finds none of his existing ones adequate. The difference is like looking at a map he has memorized and finding that all the terrain it describes is still present, correctly proportioned, accurately labeled, but the map is somehow of a country he has never been to. He reaches for it, very carefully the way one reaches for something potentially hot. It does not respond the way it should. There is no fear in it. Fear has been the foundational texture of Anakin Skywalker's Force signature since Palpatine first encountered him. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of his own power and what it might do uncontrolled, fear of the Jedi leaving him, fear of Padmé dying. A rich, complex, remarkably useful architecture of fear that Palpatine has spent 11 years learning to play like an instrument. The fear is gone. Not suppressed, he knows the texture of suppression, the specific quality of something held down by will and technique. This is not that. This is simply absent, the way the pain from a healed wound is absent. Not managed. Resolved, he withdraws his perception. He sits for a moment in the warm light of his office and does something he very rarely does. He recalculates from the beginning. Dooku is captured. This is confirmed. The Temple's communication logs, which he has access to through channels the Council believes are secure, had registered the prisoner transfer 6 hours ago. He had expected to be consulted on the disposition of Dooku's captivity, as he is consulted on all matters of sufficient Republic security interest. No consultation has come. The Jedi are keeping Dooku in the Temple, which is irregular, and they have not explained why, which is more irregular still. The Confederate server in Geonosis orbit has gone dark. Not destroyed, the transponder is still registering, the ship still present, but the command access codes have been cycled by a remote override from an unknown point of origin. Every comlog in the server's archive has been tagged with a Republic security seal that should not exist outside the Chancellor's own office authorization. He had not authorized it. The Clone Army. He reaches for the status of Order 66's readiness, the specific Force thread he has maintained to that particular piece of architecture. The contingency he has spent 14 years constructing with the patient pleasure of a craftsman building something that must be perfect because it can only be used once. The thread ends in nothing. He sits with this for 3 full seconds, which is, for Sheev Palpatine, the approximate equivalent of another man sitting with something for an hour. Then he opens his desk's inner panel and removes the comm unit that exists on no registered frequency and contacts no registered recipient, and he holds it in his hand, and he does not use it, because there is no one left to call. Dooku is in the Temple. Grievous is in the Outer Rim, commanding a fleet that is now, by the logic of what's been done to the Confederate command server, essentially blind. The Clone Army has just done something, he cannot specify what, but the Order 66 thread is not merely dormant, it is structurally altered. The command architecture changed at a level that would require direct access to the Kaminoan genetic database. Someone has read the last page of his book. He sets the comm unit down. The decision, when it arrives, takes approximately 4 seconds. He is not a man who panics in the conventional sense. Panic is a state for people who have not pre-built their contingencies, and he has been building contingencies since before most of the people currently serving in the Senate were born. He has exit routes. He has resources that exist outside the Republic's financial architecture. He has identities and vessels and safe routes through wild space that no intelligence service has mapped. What he does not have is time. which is a problem he has rarely encountered and finds genuinely offensive. He rises from the desk. His personal guard detail is 4 men, positioned at the corridor intersections outside the office, Senate guardsmen. Ceremonial in appearance and considerably less ceremonial in function. He opens the office's secondary door, the one that feeds into the private corridor connecting the executive suite to the Senate's internal transit system, and he moves through it, with the unhurried stride of a man who is going somewhere he has always intended to go. The first guard falls into step. "Chancellor, I'm late for an appointment." Smooth, warm, the voice he has worn as Chancellor for 12 years, reassuring, patrician, radiating the specific confidence of a man who has never had cause for doubt. The private lift. "Please." The guard moves ahead to the lift. The second guard takes a position 3 steps back. The corridor is empty, paneled in dark wood and soft lighting, the aesthetic of serious government rather than spectacle. The lift doors open. He steps inside. The doors close, and in the enclosed space of the lift, alone for the first time in 4 hours, Sheev Palpatine allows his face to do what it has not done in the corridor. Nothing. The Chancellor's warmth, the Chancellor's confidence, the Chancellor's entire careful architecture of performed humanity. All of it simply stops, the way a display screen stops when the power cuts, and what remains is the face underneath, which is not warm, which has never been warm, which is, at this moment, calculating. The lift descends. It stops. The doors open on the Senate District's private transit level, and the 4 figures standing in the corridor are not transit staff. Anakin Skywalker stands in the center. To his left, Obi-Wan Kenobi. To Obi-Wan's left, Mace Windu, with the specific quality of stillness that Mace Windu deploys the way other people deploy weapons. And at the corridor's far end, small and ancient and radiating the weight of nearly 900 years of knowing exactly what he is looking at, Yoda. Palpatine looks at them. They look at him. The corridor is very quiet. "Palpatine," Mace Windu said. His voice has no inflection in it at all. "The Senate Security Committee has authorized a warrant for your detention pending investigation into criminal conspiracy against the Republic." A pause the size of exactly 1 breath. "You will come with us." Palpatine looks at Anakin. Anakin looks back. The face that looks back at him is 19 years old and has eyes that are not. Palpatine reads those eyes with the full force of 70 years of perception and finds, behind them, something he has no instrument for. A man who has been to the end of every road Palpatine has built and come back from all of them, standing in a corridor outside a lift with his hands at his sides and no fear anywhere in him at all. "My boy," Palpatine said softly. The voice shifts as he speaks, dropping its warmth by degrees, shedding the Chancellor the way a coat is shed, until what comes out of him at the end of the sentence is something older and considerably colder. "You've done all this to save them, and they will still fear you for what you might become." Anakin holds his gaze. "No," he said. "They won't." The space between them holds for 1 more second. Then Palpatine's hand moves, and the darkness inside him, the darkness he has fed and tended for 7 decades like a garden, comes fully and finally into the open. A lightsaber appears from within the folds of the Chancellor's robe. The crimson blade ignites. The corridor becomes a different kind of place. It happens in the space of a single ignition. The crimson light throwing the paneled walls into sharp relief, the warm wood grain gone alien under red, the soft Senate lighting suddenly irrelevant beside the specific luminance of an active lightsaber blade in a confined space. Sound changes too. The hum of the blade fills the corridor with a frequency that is felt as much as heard. A vibration that lives in the chest cavity and the back of the teeth. Palpatine moves. Not toward the 4 of them. That is the first surprise, and Anakin had not anticipated it even knowing what he knows. He moves laterally, toward the corridor wall, and the wall opens because of course it does, because the man who has administered this building for 12 years has had 12 years to learn which walls open, and the secondary passage beyond it feeds into the Senate Rotunda's upper gallery. "Split," Anakin said. They split. The rotunda at this hour is empty of senators. The great circular chamber with its thousands of hovering platforms, its central podium, its domed ceiling that makes the room feel like the interior of a planet. Empty, lit to minimum overnight levels, the platforms locked in their docked positions along the chamber walls. The floor far below is a mosaic of the Republic seal, enormous, rendered in stone that predates the current government by 800 years. Palpatine reaches the gallery rail and stops. Below him, the rotunda floor. Above him, the dome. On three sides, the gallery curve, and the four of them emerging from the passage at different points along it. He looks at the geometry of it and makes a calculation. Then he steps off the gallery rail and drops, and the force catches him like a hand, and he descends to the rotunda floor 30 meters below, with a slowness that is entirely deliberate. Theatrical, Anakin thinks. The specific theatrics of a man who has always understood the value of an entrance, and lands at the center of the Republic seal without a sound. They follow him down. Mace Windu is the first to engage. This, too, is not surprising. Windu's Form 7, Vapad, is the most aggressive combat form in the Jedi repertoire, and the only one that walks the edge of the dark side deliberately, channeling the practitioner's own darkness back into the fight. It was designed specifically for opponents who generate enormous dark side energy, the theory being that their own power becomes fuel against them. Against Palpatine, against Darth Sidious at his full expression, it is the correct tool in the hands of the correct person, and Mace Windu knows this about himself, without arrogance and without apology. He comes in from the left. Fast. The purple blade tracing an angle that forces Palpatine's guard into a specific configuration. And then Yoda is there from the right. And the thing about Yoda in a lightsaber duel that Anakin has only ever seen twice in his life is this. Nothing he does makes physical sense. He is 80 centimeters tall and nearly 900 years old, and he moves like something that has decided the normal relationship between mass and velocity simply doesn't apply to it. The short blade catches the light in a green arc that seems to arrive before the motion that produces it, and Palpatine takes his first step backward. One step. That is all. He recovers into a form Anakin has no name for, something older than the Jedi Academy's catalogued styles, something built before the current forms were codified, before the Sith operated under the rule of two and needed to conceal what they were. Raw, powerful, fundamentally offensive in a way that the recognized forms are not. Each strike designed not to win the exchange, but to create the conditions for a specific kind of follow-through, the way a chess player sacrifices pieces to open a diagonal 3 moves out. Obi-Wan takes the diagonal. He reads the follow-through 2 beats early and is already moving to deny it. The elegant Suresu defense, Form the Third, the most conservative and complete defensive form ever developed, designed to create the impression of an opening while closing it, to make an opponent's most powerful committed strike land on nothing, and leave them exposed. Palpatine's blade meets Obi-Wan's guard 3 times in rapid succession, and each time finds a wall that wasn't visible until the blade was already committed. Anakin holds the perimeter. This is the assignment he gave himself, and it is the correct assignment, not because he is the least capable fighter in this room, which he is not, but because Palpatine is going to make a specific choice. And when he makes it, the response needs to come from exactly one person. He watches. The duel moves across the rotunda floor in the way that high-level force combat moves, not in straight lines, not in the circular patterns of choreographed stage fighting, but in sudden explosive clusters of exchange followed by brief repositioning lulls, the geometry constantly shifting. The terrain of the fight changing as the combatants use the space. One of the locked platform arrays along the wall takes a strike and shears from its housing, dropping 20 meters to the stone floor with a crash that rings off the dome. A section of gallery railing on the upper level comes loose, falls, impacts a platform bracket on the way down. Palpatine is losing. Not quickly. Not obviously. But Anakin can see it in the recalculation happening behind those yellow eyes, the moment-to-moment tactical assessment of a man who has fought at this level before and is finding, for the first time, that the math doesn't resolve in his favor. 3 opponents of this quality, coordinated, with no access to the emotional architecture he normally exploits, no fear to leverage, no anger to redirect. No attachment to weaponize. He has nothing to pull on. The realization comes to him visibly. Anakin watches it arrive, watches Palpatine's eyes move to him across the rotunda floor, and understands what is about to happen. Palpatine breaks from the three-way engagement with an expenditure of force power that physically staggers all three of them, not a strike, a wave. Raw telekinetic pressure in all directions, buying himself 3 seconds and 4 meters of open space. His eyes are on Anakin. Only on Anakin. He raises both hands. The lightning that comes out of them is not the measured, calibrated lightning of a man demonstrating power. It is everything. 70 years of dark side cultivation discharged in a single sustained torrent. The kind of output that has killed people who were actively defending against it, that has bent the trajectory of galactic history twice by landing on the right target at the right moment. It comes for Anakin like a wall. He does not step back. He brings his hands up, both of them, bare. No lightsaber, no blade interposed. And he opens himself to the Force the way he has learned to open himself to things that cannot be fought, only received. And the lightning hits his palms and enters, not reflection, not deflection. The current travels into him and through him, and the Force receives it the way deep water receives a stone, surrounding it, absorbing its energy, dispersing its force through a volume too large to be disrupted by it. His hands arc white. His arms carry the current in visible lines beneath the skin. It hurts with a totality that is almost clarifying. He does not move. The lightning continues. He stands in it. Palpatine pours more into the sustained discharge. Anakin can feel the desperation entering it. The dawning understanding that this is not landing the way it is supposed to land. That the weapon is not working. That the decades of cultivated intelligence about what Anakin Skywalker is and how he breaks has been rendered completely, permanently obsolete. He stands in the lightning until the lightning stops. His hands are smoking. They will hurt, later, considerably. He looks at them now. Both hands, flesh, 19 years old, unmarked by amputation or fire or 23 years inside black armor. And he breathes, and he lowers them. The rotunda is very quiet. Palpatine stands 4 meters away, and for the first time in Anakin's 2 lifetimes of knowing this face, it carries something he has never seen on it. Nothing. No calculation. No warmth, performed or otherwise. No contempt, no condescension, no long-view patience of a man who believes he will outlast whatever is currently inconveniencing him. Just a man in the ruins of a 70-year architecture, standing in the place where his masterwork used to be. Mace Windu moves. The purple blade comes up at Palpatine's guard from the left, decisive, and Palpatine raises his own blade to meet it with the reflexes of a man who has been fighting this long because his reflexes never fail, and Obi-Wan takes his right side, and Yoda arrives from directly above, in a descent that should not be physically possible for something of his size and age, and is entirely possible because he has simply decided it is, and Palpatine's guard fails on 3 sides simultaneously. The lightsaber leaves his hand. Gone. Spinning across the stone floor, coming to rest against the base of the central podium, with a sound that echoes off the dome and comes back changed. He stands in the center of the Republic seal, empty-handed. Anakin walks to him. He stops 2 meters away, and he looks at the face, and he says nothing for a moment, because nothing is the correct thing to say. Then, it's over. Palpatine looks at him. The yellow eyes are still. You were meant to be. I know what I was meant to be, Anakin said. I was it, for 23 years. I know every room in that house. He holds the gaze. It's over. Yoda speaks from behind Palpatine, and his voice in the empty rotunda carries the weight of nearly 9 centuries. Surrender, you will, he said. Or not. Your choice, this is. The last one. A long silence. Then Palpatine's hands come up, empty, and the last Sith Lord of the Rule of Two stands in the center of the Republic seal with the overhead dome reflecting his own stillness back at him from 1,000 angles. Mace Windu moves forward with the restraints. Anakin watches. The rotunda breathes around them, The enormous stone-vaulted breadth of a room that has held the Republic's ceremonies and failures and ambitions for 800 years, and the sound of the binders closing on Palpatine's wrists is very small inside it. Very ordinary. The kind of sound a door makes when it closes at the end of a long day. He exhales. His hands hurt. He looks at them one more time. Both hands. Whole. Real. And then he looks up, and Obi-Wan is watching him from across the rotunda floor with an expression that is too many things at once to name, and Anakin meets it with the first uncomplicated breath he has taken in a very long time. The trial lasted 11 days. It was not, in the end, a complicated proceeding. Complicated trials require ambiguity, and there was none. The financial records from the Confederate server, Dooku's testimony delivered in the flat, precise cadence of a man with nothing left to protect. The Kaminoan access logs, the private comm channel archived under the CNR Umbra identifier. The Senate Legal Committee laid it out across 11 days, and the evidence did not require interpretation. It simply was. Palpatine, Darth Sidious, was convicted on 43 counts. The sentencing took one additional day. The Jedi Council, in consultation with the Senate's Emergency Judicial Panel, reached the verdict that Jedi law had always maintained for confirmed Sith Lords who had committed crimes of this magnitude, execution, carried out without spectacle, in a secure facility, by people who did their work without enjoying it. It was done on the 12th day. Dooku stood trial separately, 3 weeks later. 12 counts. Life imprisonment in a Republic facility on Coruscant, in a cell considerably nicer than the one he'd occupied in the temple, an irony he acknowledged, when Anakin visited him once, with the dry precision of a man who has retained his sense of humor by making it sharp enough to cut through anything. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not offer apologies. He confirmed every piece of evidence the prosecution needed, and answered every question with the accuracy of a man who has decided that accuracy is the last form of dignity available to him. Anakin did not hate him for what he had been. He found, when he looked at Dooku across the visitor's table, that he felt something closer to the recognition of a common wound. He did not say this aloud. The Clone Wars, as a conflict, lasted 18 days from Palpatine's arrest. Without the Sith coordinating both sides, the Separatist leadership fractured immediately. Some factions attempting to negotiate, some disbanding. The Techno-Union and the banking clan discovering abruptly that their financial exposure was considerable and their political protection was gone. The Senate convened an emergency session, and the motion to demobilize the clone army passed with 312 votes in favor and 41 opposed, the 41 being senators who had simply not read the room. The Jedi Order began what Yoda called, in the understatement of nearly 9 centuries, a period of reflection. Reforms moved slowly. They always do, in institutions old enough to have forgotten why they made certain rules. But they moved. Anakin's resignation from the Order was submitted on a Tuesday, in writing, on a single page of flimsoplast that said what it needed to say without saying more than that. Obi-Wan and Yoda were both present when he delivered it. They met in a small room on the temple's eastern side, not a formal chamber, not a council setting, just a room with windows that looked out over Coruscant's skyline and 3 chairs arranged without ceremony. Obi-Wan had brought tea. Nobody commented on this. "You're certain," Obi-Wan said. Not challenging. Confirming, yes, and Padmé. "She's resigning from the Senate at the end of the current session. We're going to Naboo first. Then," he pauses, "we haven't decided yet. That's part of the point." Obi-Wan looks at the page in his hand. He looks at it for a moment, and then he sets it down on the table, and something moves through his face that is not grief and is not happiness, but sits in the territory between them where the truest things tend to live. "You know," he said, "I spent 10 years being your teacher, and I'm not entirely sure which of us learned more." Anakin looks at him. "I'm sorry. For the other life. For that life didn't happen." Obi-Wan's voice is quiet and absolute. "This one did. Don't carry the other one into this one any further than it's already come." He meets Anakin's eyes. "You came back. You broke the cycle. That is enough. That is more than enough." The room holds this for a moment. Then Yoda, from his chair, makes a sound that is not quite a word, A small, ruminative sound. The sound of nearly 9 centuries arriving at something it considers settled. "Go," he said. "Live what Jedi are for, to serve life. This, too, is that." Anakin nods. He does not trust his voice entirely, so he says nothing more, which is, increasingly, his approach to moments that matter. At the door he turns back once. Obi-Wan raises his teacup in a gesture that contains everything that needs to be said, and says none of it aloud, which is very him. And Anakin smiles. An actual smile. Uncomplicated. The kind he hadn't been capable of for 23 years. And then he goes. Naboo. 5 years later. The lake country in the late afternoon light is so green it seems implausible. The kind of green that exists in places where water is generous, and the sun falls at the right angle, and nothing has decided yet to be cruel. The villa sits on a terrace above the water, its stone warm from the day, its garden running down to the lake shore in terraced rows of things that flower in colors Tatooine doesn't have a word for. The children are in the garden. Luke is 6. With his father's coloring and his mother's precision, he approaches everything, including play, with a seriousness that makes adults smile when he isn't looking. Leia is 6, with her mother's bearing and, already, her mother's specific quality of attention. The way she watches a room before she enters it. They are currently engaged in the project of building something from components spread across the flagstones, servos, coupling rings, a motivator housing, the basic skeleton of a small utility droid. Anakin sits on the low garden wall and watches them work. He is not young anymore, not in the way that matters. The body is 24, still technically young by any biological measure. But the eyes are older than that, and everyone who looks closely enough knows it. Padmé, coming out from the villa's open doorway with 2 cups, looks closely enough and has always known it, and has never once treated it as a problem. She sits beside him on the wall and hands him a cup, and they watch the children together in the particular comfortable silence of people who have run out of things they need to hide from each other. "Luke's almost got the motivator coupling," she said. "He's been at it for an hour. He's not going to ask for help. He's your son. He's your son," Anakin said. "I ask for help." Padmé looks at him with an expression that assigns this statement exactly the credibility it deserves. Below them, Leia says something to Luke in an authoritative undertone that carries up the terrace without being fully audible. Luke makes the face of a person receiving advice they didn't request, and are unwillingly concluding is correct. He adjusts the coupling. Something clicks into place. He looks up at his father across the garden with an expression of pure involuntary triumph, the face of a 6-year-old who has done a thing and wants someone to have seen it. Anakin raises his cup. Luke grins and looks back down. Anakin looks at his hands on the cup, both of them, as he always does, the looking being a habit he has stopped trying to break, because it is not a bad habit. It is simply a true one. A way of confirming, in the daily tactile ordinary of things, that the life he is inside is the one he chose. Flesh. Warmth from the ceramic. The sensation of the garden's late afternoon air against the backs of his knuckles. Real. He is holding a cup of tea in a garden above a lake on Naboo, and his children are 30 meters away, and his wife is beside him, and the Empire was never built, and the temple still stands, and every clone in the Grand Army still has their free will, and the Sith are gone. He breathes. Later, after dinner, after the children are inside and the lake has gone dark, and the stars have come out above the hills in the abundant way they do, in places with no competing light, he walks down to the shore alone. There is a small stone marker at the water's edge. Simple, uncarved except for a name and 2 dates. He had placed it here himself, 2 years ago, when they decided Naboo was home. A memorial marker, because the grave on Tatooine was 3 systems away and the desert was no place for the memory of a woman who had never wanted to be in the desert. He stands in front of it for a while. The lake moves, very slightly, in some small wind coming off the hills. "I remember everything, Mom," he said. His voice is quiet, shaped for the space between one person and a stone. All of it. Both lives. A pause. I've been trying to deserve the second one. The water moves. The stars reflect in it, broken and reassembled with each small wave. He thinks of the tent. The amber light. Her hand cooling in both of his, both real hands, flesh. capable of feeling the exact temperature of her palm against his. The sentence that stopped before it, finished. He finishes it. "I love you too, Mom," he said. I finally listened. The lake holds the words for a moment, then the small wind moves through the garden above, and the stars turn in the water, and Anakin Skywalker stands in the dark with both hands at his sides and breathes the green air of a world that has, against considerable odds, chosen peace. It is enough. It is, at last, enough. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.